So, we got a lot to talk about. Before we dive in, I think just a little bit of context of your journey, kind of what informs your process and how it got you here. Some big titles, you're sitting on right now. You're creative director of U.S. makeup for L'Oreal USA. Newly elected board member, probably one of the younger board members of the Black Fashion Council.
Yes.
Which is big, and I want to learn more about how you made this happen, but you initiated the L'Oreal U.S. Diversity Council. That's launching in 2021. That process, I think, can be really informative when we talk about that. I think of, you got a Barbie partnership.
Yeah.
You got Lion King, Disney 2019. You launched a product alongside that live action movie release. And in terms of global, which I want to talk a lot about, you're the creative director of South Africa Woolworths, which also, I understand, came with your first product release. You didn't do your first product drop, your first collection in the US. You chose to do it on an international scale, and not just anywhere, but on the continent. So I'd be really interested to learn kind of how that feels, and as somebody who's been to South Africa a lot, we understand it's a pretty unique place.
Absolutely.
Different than the rest of what we call sub-Saharan Africa, which is sometimes code for Black Africa. You took that product, didn't leave it isolated in South Africa. I understand you have that being distributed around the continent. So I want to learn a little bit more about
More or less just SA.
Yeah.
Just SA, just in South Africa.
Okay, okay. You created your first product drop in South Africa at Woolworths. Is that one of the first times, I imagine, as somebody, we'll talk about your upbringing in Buffalo and Harlem, seeing yourself on a global scale? Talk a little bit about kind of like how, when you saw yourself expanding and kind of having a position on the globe instead of just in a state.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think the moment I started to realize that, okay, this is larger than the territory I'm in, which is New York or Harlem or, and the States, was Fashion Week. I was a student for Pat McGrath. I was a student for Charlotte Tilbury in New York, Paris, London, Milan for a while, doing all the shows, 30 shows, 40 shows a season.
Damn.
On sets, doing campaigns and things like that as an assistant to great people. On the sets with Mario Testino, Annie Leibovitz, Stephen Meisel. So being in that world, but my voice was just being cultivated. I was a student. I was happy to be an assistant. I was happy to be just in the room and soak it all up. I wanted to be the best assistant that was possible. So the global idea didn't necessarily come, even though I was seeing the world at that point, until I think that I got the contract with Parkwood to go on tour with Beyonce. So Beyonce and I met in 2010 at Tom Ford's first women's wear show. So basically, she kind of pulled me from that scene. And I was Charlotte Tilbury's assistant, and she gave me a list of names, like, you're gonna do Beyonce, Julianne Moore, Daphne Guinness, and I'm Joan Smalls, who's like a best friend of mine.
Yeah, I know Joan. And
so, in that moment, I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. But I knew she already had someone who was really amazing. So I just did it, knew it was gonna be a great day, and then let it go. But I got a call a couple months later to come to these offices. I thought it was the IRS, actually, but it was Parkwood, and they asked me to do, to go on tour and to do an album and all this other kind of stuff.
You had only done B once at that point.
One time.
Wow.
Yeah.
When you first meet her, I think a lot of folks, as they're coming up, they want an opportunity to just have audience with people who they can change their life, they can learn from, they can have as clients. And there's probably pretty anxiety driving, right?
Yeah.
You want to make the most of that. You don't want to mess it up. You probably end up saying and doing too much.
Sure.
Do you remember what that was like? Maybe mistakes you made or didn't make, or what you knew well enough to do or not do? Was it just she saw the work, or did you kind of, here's my moment? Yeah,
I didn't see it as my moment as much as I just wanted to get through it. Because, when I knew I had to, do her makeup for the show, and I know that Tom Ford is there, and it's not just going to be her who's judging; it's the business who's judging the work as well.
Right.
I went in the bathroom and called my mom. Mom, I got to do this. Just know it's going to be an important smoky eye.
Beautiful.
But I didn't want to be anything else except myself. My whole thing is, once I start being if I stop being myself and this new person enters, then it's going to be a whole thing. So I just really wanted to just be me, and I didn't know any other way to not. So I went in and saw Julius, and I just went in the room and I just started talking to her. But I do know that I didn't want to give too much and be too much. I didn't want to disrupt the energy or the flow or the frequency already in the room.
Yeah.
So I just came in and just started working. And my mom always says, when the spirit meets the hand or the body or the voice, art is created. So once I start working, I'm checking out.
You're in the flow.
I'm not even there technically, but I guess she liked what we did that day. And then I got a call from her company to come down to her office And they had all of my work out, like, Joan, Carly Kloss, and, all the models and people I was working on at the time. Naomi was my first client.
Wow.
Naomi Campbell. And so they offered me this contract. And I just remember looking at it. And at the time, this is when social media was just starting.
Okay.
So this is Twitter was out, but no one was posting every photo they did. It wasn't a thing. So I was the first person on the team to say, hey, listen, they said the contract was set up to the point to protect the artist like it should be.
Sure.
But for me, there was no autonomy to my own artistry. And I was like, well, you can't do this, you can't post, you can't say that you worked on these projects. So I can't go underground. I'm just starting to build something for myself. All these journalists and editors know me. So if I go underground for 6 months to do this tour, it's suicide for my career.
Right.
And so I'm just like, I don't know if this is going to be able to work for me. So I kind of walked away. And I was kicking myself like, oh my God, this is the craziest, the dumbest thing you could have done. And then I just remember getting a phone call from Angie, her cousin, and she's saying, hey, listen, well, let's just approve the post. Let's work on it. Let's, we can find a way.
Right.
And we did, and so, so I went on tour. To your question, or to your point, the first time I knew that the reach was larger than, my area or my block was seeing, going to Stade de France in Paris or Wembley Stadium in England, seeing 80,000 people looking at the same face that you're working with every night.
Yeah.
And, and so knowing that the work that I do has to emit some kind of emotion, and she has to have some kind of visual connection to this audience through the vehicle, which is these eyes or this lips or whatever that looks like, So that was the first moment, I would say.
That makes me think also about you having the wherewithal to not get so gassed just by being invited, but making sure that this works for me. And I think, maybe that reminds me of contracts, in which we should talk about down the line, but when you see this, it's Beyonce of all people, I've got to be able, it's really wise of you to step back, not be so excited just about being seen, but this needs to make sense for me to move forward. It should be additive to my resume, to my position in my world, not just have me disappear and have to explain it. It could be negative if it doesn't have that. So figuring out how to I'm sure, be respectful, be present, but I need a little bit more, because you don't get anything you don't ask for.
Yes, so true.
That people's job, and you acknowledge this, their job is to protect her. They don't work for you.
No,
their job is they have a job. Your job, you are the character in your movie. You've got to make sure that character is being served. Yeah. Sometimes you got to be malleable. Sometimes you got to make adjustments, but it's really smart. How old were you at that point?
I was 28 or something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so that's
28, 29.
That was a big move.
Yeah.
It seemed to set a lot of things in motion.
Yeah. And also the thing is, as we look at artists, the artists I was going to work for, myself, or any kind of art, you want to have autonomy to it. Look at Prince, look at all these people, and they're fighting. When you do something from your soul and your spirit, you feel connected to it, and you want to honor it, but not just honor it. You're protective of your artwork. You're protective of your craft. You're protective of anything that you do that comes from you, that your brand. You're really protective. Even I had this kind of knowledge of that. Even when I was an assistant, I knew that even though I'm an assistant, my brand is, I'm going to be the best assistant in this space, because I need to be the destination. When the artist is thinking of the job, she's automatically going to call me.
Yeah.
So, and that it doesn't leave you at any point. Yeah.
I think that's also an important thing for us all to be hearing as we're growing, and folks who are watching and listening to this. We all put in work and all had jobs that had to lead to other ones. I think of a time you saying you have to be the best assistant you can be, because it's what you're doing now. I remember at a time I waited tables, I bussed, I bartended, I did a lot of those jobs as well. And I remember feeling at a point feeling above my job as a waiter. I think I had done one appearance in a movie, wanted that to do something. I was maybe going to go to law school, and I had to go to work, and I'm still waiting tables. And I think I moved past it psychologically.
Totally.
My ego did. And I wasn't doing a good job. I was inattentive one night and kind of neglected some things. And this old head pulled me aside. We had a little bit of a vibe, but I had not brought what I said I was going to bring, and I got distracted. And he was just, with total respect, we're just like, yeah, but you're doing this now. Be excellent at what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
Like, don't go past it. So we're all going to be doing grunt work and having jobs we don't love and have to get up early to do something we don't love, but take pride in your work, I think, is what I'm taking from that. As an assistant, there's a lot of work you got to do that you might not be excited to do, but I think you said something earlier off camera that I'd like you to elaborate on, which was, I think it's part of this is to be, who did you assist under?
Yeah.
We were talking about formality in this line of work. I said, is your line of work one where it matters if you have formal training or a degree or something like that? What really matters? What is the thing we check on? And you said, who did you assist under? Who were you mentored by is pretty important.
In fashion and beauty, it's like, what school do you come from? Fashion likes to raise its own people. I feel blessed that I was raised in that area of the business in terms of the eye, because a lot of people who weren't, they have their talent has to fight for them with the magazine. So I'm the magazine's first choice because they see me for the last 10 years, So that's kind of the cool thing about it. But you just want to make sure that, you have a few teachers. You're not just looking from one pot to study from, but I have assisted so many different people. And also information should be coming from everywhere. And I always talk about having a bigger knowledge outside of your discipline. I mean, for me, I went to school for art history since I was 6 years old, 6th grade also. And having a knowledge outside of makeup has made me a better makeup artist. It's allowed me to have a better, more conversation something to bring to the table. Have a point of view that doesn't just rely or start and stop on the face. So take a painting class, know about what happened in antiquity, Egypt. All of this is nothing is new. Makeup's older than the Bible, it predates the Bible. So just having some context actually makes you, like I said, again, a destination.
Yeah, being able to color outside the lines and also be informed beyond your, and I say to actors or directors, make sure you're not only watching movies in your genre.
Absolutely right.
Watch some other things you wouldn't think you'd have no interest in. You will take something from it. You will know what's been done before, what informs it, and you are doing visual storytelling. So you came in with an understanding of art and visual storytelling and painting. Does that tie into how you got started?
Yeah. So grew up in Buffalo. I'm the oldest of 3, single mom, and my mother was she still is just the most supportive person ever. And so I went to Atlanta for school. I got accepted to school, and I didn't even really think about how you're gonna pay for it and all this other kind of thing. So I went to Atlanta with $400 I was 3 days after I graduated high school.
Wow.
I went to school and I liked it, but it was just too expensive for me. And the reality kicked in of oh, you can't just go back and call for more money and all these other kind of things. So I had to drop out. Dropped out of school first or second semester, and just basically just put some pieces together and made it work. I know that I was happy to be at the place where a friend was a model for a catalog, and she asked me could I paint her face because the makeup artist canceled. And so I'm like, is this a thing, for real?
She even asked you because you had an art background.
Yeah, I was with her. I just went with her to kick it for the day.
Right.
And so so I started playing around. The photographer asked me to do the same thing next week for $250. And I was like, you're gonna pay me? You gotta give me money for this?
Right.
And so he told his friends about me who were opening a store at Mac in Lenox Mall, Atlanta. And then they were like, well, we have to wait for him he's not 19. I was still like an 18-year-old kid. Mm-hmm. And so once I was 19, they hired me, they transferred me to New York City, not even a year later, because I guess I had high sales in that mall. And then I started working I got to Manhattan. So I got to Manhattan, first apartment was in the Bronx.
Wow. And
I loved Harlem though. Harlem is I stayed in Harlem for 18 years. Harlem is my life. I still feel like Harlem is home even though I live in Los Angeles now.
And the aesthetic must have informed a lot of school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you know what? For being late at 23,
Really?
I thought my whole world was over, yeah. But I kept going, I kept going. I started also doing visual merchandising. I started doing the windows at Barney's. Henry Bendel's, I was the men's merchandiser at Gucci for a while, and they told me I needed a degree, but I was like, I'm just gonna keep going to someone else until they can give me a yes. Mm-hmm. And I was this one guy looked like he was running the show, and I just started talking to him, and then he's like, yeah, come in tomorrow and freelance in the store. And then that turned to a full-time gig, and then I needed more money because it's expensive to live. So I started doing makeup in a strip club in Queens, called Rivieras. So shout out to Rivie, shout out to the girls.
Wow.
But yeah, man, they got me here. So I remember, when I got the call to work with Pat McGrath.
Real quick, who's Pat McGrath?
So Pat McGrath is, she's like the queen of makeup. She has a book full of Vogue covers. She's the most influential makeup artist of all time. And so, and she's a British black woman, and she grew up in that era of, the supers and all that kind of stuff like that. Stephen Meisel, she's that kind of thing. So Pat, I was like, just your first name only kind of thing, Pat. And so I was like, oh, wow. So this is when Fashion Week was at the tents, not at Lincoln Center and spread all around in Brooklyn, when everything was right at Bryant Park. So I got a chance to go to one of the shows, and I did the show. And Naomi was at that show. And so I met her there, and I was just like, oh my God, like I idolized Naomi from back in the day because seeing a black face backstage at Versace in Paris or in Milan, opening, closing, and demanding like what she was demanding was like kind of unheard of, you know, especially for a brown-skinned black woman, like, you know?
Important.
And so, yeah, it just sent shockwaves through all of us. So long story short, I started working at the strip club, and I came back the night after the show, after that fashion show. I like on such a buzz or a high because I just did this cool thing. And I was like, girls, you know, let me tell you about today I had. And, you know, Pat McGrath asked me would I be in Italy 2 weeks later to do the Milan shows. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll be there. Mind you, I had no passport. I had no money really to get there. Yeah. But I told her, yes, I would be. And so I told the girls that, and they were like, oh, you're gonna go? I'm like, no, I can't go. I have bills. I have so much to take care of. So I left, came back to work the next day. They put a jar together of $2,200 in singles and fives and everything like that, and they twerked me to Milan, you know? So basically, my first passport stamp was Milan, Italy, and the girls got me there.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. There's two elements to that story that I want to say more on. One was you getting fired. I think there's a lot, these are kind of the little lessons that we can be learning in terms of that coming up mistakes. So we're talking about there's a technical skill and there's the social etiquette learnings of actual life, especially as a black person in a very white dominated space. What lesson or what do you remember about that time? You're working at Mac, it's a big job, you're feeling yourself, you're in New York. If you're looking back, what mistakes did you make?
The moment I got fired, I understood. I was like, it's a business decision. I wasn't really, you know, doing what I knew. I was like, okay, I get it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, cool. So I wasn't bummed. My thing is like, okay, what do I do now? Mm-hmm. You know, I got rent and, you know, bills are serious. And I also want to take some money and keep sending money back home to my family.
Yep.
In that space, I just kept going. I just kept moving, and I didn't have any other option except to keep moving. The universe conspires to help you when you actually are leaning into walking with it. So I believe firmly in vibrational alignment. Mm-hmm. So just being in alignment with what you want to receive. It could be a coffee cup, it could be $1 million contract, it could be a parking spot. Mm-hmm. But you know, just seeing it, and so I kind of was visualizing this world still, and it kind of sort of happened, you know. But I do feel blessed that I had the girls or the club to rely on for cash.
Yeah.
Because to be honest, you know, I looked at a lot of people who were interns, you know, at the generation that I grew up in. A lot of people don't intern as much as they used to or understudy, but there were so many interns. And at Vogue, at Glamour, you know, all the photographers had interns or assistants. But I realized, I'm like, wow, you don't make any money being an editorial assistant. You make no money. I mean, in New York, in fashion. So everyone doesn't realize this, but when you do a cover story, every person who's on the front of that cover or behind the scenes, they're getting an editorial rate, you know? So, but what you do with that, you know, is where you can make your money. But as an assistant, I'm making $50 a day, $25 a day.
You say editorial rate, meaning not much money.
Not much money.
Okay. Standard low fee. You just,
for everyone.
It's, whether it's Vogue or some local magazine, it ain't much dough.
It's not.
And living in New York,
yeah.
You know, you have to have, so your point is like, you live in a very expensive place. Yeah. People either interning for free, which you got to be floated by somebody.
They were.
Right, which is not a privilege a lot of us have, or you're making a base rate, which is not a privilege a lot of us have to be able to afford to live that way without having to hustle. You got to jump on a train and go to Queens to compensate for that income.
When we look at the socioeconomic, you know, differences between cultures, I just remember seeing a sea of mainly white women, young white women, who were able to, you know, have these jobs and be these assistants because their parents were bankrolled in their lives. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I grew up with them, and I'm still friends with them today, and they became, you know, editors and all that kind of stuff. But I just remember, like, how are you guys able to keep this up? And so that's what made me stay in the club for 3 years, you know. So I would go in the morning, work at these fancy places, beautiful elaborate catering for Vanity Fair or whatever that looks like, and then take a quick 30-minute, 50-minute disco nap and head to Queens and do it all over the next day.
I think what that also speaks to the support you got from the ladies you worked with at the Riviera is taking strategic risks. You didn't have a job to go to Italy for. You believed that you would put yourself in a position to be there. I kind of think of like the movie The Pursuit of Happiness or something, right? Where Will Smith's like grinding to just put yourself in positions to win, but you're taking risks. She could just not call you. She could just say, you know, it could not work out. But also for those women to choose to do that with their hard-earned money, they not only have to like you, like your vibe, like the spirit that you're giving them. It's a very intimate, personal interaction,
right.
And you have to be good. So that combination seems to be something that's going to consistently be important throughout.
You know, man, I always say this to people who are younger, and it doesn't matter what business you're in, but I definitely know there's so many people who do amazing hair, who are great hairstylists, great makeup artists, great styling, photographers, but I'm not in the business of makeup. I'm in the business of people. So like, people, the way you make people feel is your brand. When people will campaign for you, they will fight for you, they will fly you business, they will remember you if you make them feel something or make them feel good, And we're in a business where everyone is concentrated on being nice just to the talent. Yep. Or just being nice to the person who is the principal or whatever, but ignores everyone else behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. And so, but that wasn't me. I was like, I want to be cool. We all got a story. We all are on the same storyline. The reason that I feel I got here is because we were all assistants together. Now we're all little cats. Now we're all big cats.
Yeah.
And so the same people who were assistants back in the day who are the editors of this or who are running the show here. So it's like character is not just about, who can I be nice to, who's seemingly under the light. Yeah. It's really everyone else who's running the show, from the person who brings in the catering to the people who are, the janitors.
Yeah, that actually is character because there's not something in it for you. Like to give, to be present is to be present without expectation of a reward. People, as Maya Angelou that said famously, people might not remember what you do, but they will always remember how you made them feel.
So to your earlier question is when did you know that it was a thing? So, got to Italy. First show was Dolce & Gabbana, then she took me to Prada. It was a big deal for a black guy to go to Prada, I guess. I don't know at the time, which is so sad. And then she sends me to Naomi's hotel room and I got thrust into it all. But even doing that kind of thing, and even though I was doing work that I would see the covers, it wasn't my name, it was still Pat's name. I was an assistant.
Yeah.
So when you're an assistant, you can't take credit for the work that you do. Yeah. But when I was on tour, I'll never forget, the first time, when the Beyonce album dropped, I want to say, or the self-titled album, I'll never forget. We were back in tour bus. We were in Toronto. When it dropped, I just remember we were all counting down just to see what the impact would be.
Yeah.
And so when it did, it was just like, we were just sitting there like, whoa, this is intense. The whole internet kind of fucking froze, And so that's when I knew oh, wow, these videos that we've been working on shooting, because mind you, we were doing...
You've lived with them forever without nobody seeing them.
We were touring and shooting music videos at the same time. So getting 4 hours of sleep, working, getting up at 5 a.m. to shoot a video and then going directly into the concert.
Wow.
And it's insane.
That's crazy.
It's insane. And so that kind of made me realize wow, okay, people in China actually are reposting this work. All of these girls started making makeup tutorials of the looks that I was doing at the time. This one specific video called Mine. And I was like, oh my God, this is so super cool. And then getting the phone calls from all the editors and beauty editors and stuff like that. So that was kind of the first moment I felt like, wow, this is larger than myself,
And it's you. You were talking about being not credited because you're an assistant. Your point.
Yeah. That was my first set of real credits.
Yeah. And you see your name and people know and they're referencing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Totally. And I had to find an agent. I had to get, you have to do things that are setting yourself up for success, And I don't always believe in agents, but as long as you have someone you trust who can answer, calls for you, negotiate your rate for you, you should never be negotiating your own rates and things like that. You should always just show up as talent.
Why shouldn't you be negotiating your own rate?
Because it's too personal. So I always have it because it seems glamorous. Mm-hmm. But nowadays, agents don't necessarily even know what to do with us anymore because the fact that business is changing so much, they're learning from us.
Yep.
So what you want to do is just get into a habit of having someone else negotiate for you, because if I'm going to talk about the money that I need and you're saying the budget is this and that, I'm going to feel some kind of way.
Yep.
And then when I get to set, I'm not going to be able to let that go as a creative because I'm going to feel that some part of you doesn't value something that I'm doing. And it could be a budget concern. It could just be so many other factors. But when you separate yourself or take yourself outside of that area, and you'll know everything, and you have the option to do it or not, but you can just show up as talent and never be the bad guy, in that sense. Yeah, just make sure you're protected in that way for sure. But however, I always say this, and I say it is to everybody. I'm either full price or I go for free, but I don't do discounts. Mm-hmm. So I leave my house with the same work ethic, the same amount of preparation for free. I'll leave, if I believe in something, I'll do it. It doesn't matter if it's paid or not. If I believe in it, I'm going to do it, and I won't go half-assed because I'm not getting as much.
Exactly.
That's silly, It's because it's your brand. It's what you want to do. It's what you love, or just don't do it.
Yeah.
But don't discount yourself. Don't allow somebody to say, oh, well, can you, we can negotiate, or negotiating. I understand that we all have to break at some points, but either be full rate or donate your time.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like it's also a slippery slope to okay, I'll give you a cut here, discount it here. That sets a precedent for what happens in 2 months. I heard you kind of,
Absolutely.
you looked out over here. Now it's ever changing. Like, have rules for yourself.
Yeah.
You're not going to do discounted work
You're a
quality wise.
You're a
So
business.
yeah, you wouldn't, it's a tricky one also, because sometimes we wouldn't ask for a discount from other folks.
No,
we ask.
you don't go to McDonald's and say, like, no.
Yeah.
When anywhere else, and so creatives we're tasked with this, thing that is everyone feels like they can, but also there are a lot more makeup artists and hairstylists today because of social media, and I would say beauty enthusiasts. They can go in other directions, but if you know that you're doing the work and you're really great at your craft, and and you're able to, I don't believe in competition. So even though I don't believe, and it's not coming from an arrogant place, I just don't believe that I need to look at what any of my peers are doing. As long as I'm authentically being myself and working on the best artistry that my hands can contribute or my person can do, there is no competition. No one can do what you do. Like I can take someone to go and we can shop for the same things. I'm not gonna be able to make the gumbo the way my friend's mom makes it.
Yep.
So why even try? Like, I don't even think it's smart for us to teach children that competition, because it chips away at self. But that's just my opinion.
That's interesting for folks coming up, especially with social media, where we're always looking at what everybody else is doing and comparing it to ourselves, and we're seeing everybody else's greatest hits, none of their misses.
Yeah.
You found that's not productive.
Yes, and also I'm really big on mental health. So I'm working with NAMI, National Alliance for Mental Illness. And so like I've always, tried to lean into an understanding of myself before I could even afford therapy. Trying to get some tools, trying to figure it out. Like, so, because I know this job, no matter what I'm going through before I go into a client's house or an editorial or a big job, I have to leave it there, and it's so important. A lot of people bring everything into the job with them, or want to talk to their clients about what's happening in their life all the time, or other clients. And you have to be being professional, and actually knowing that you can command what you command is also knowing that it's not stoic. You don't have to be stoic, but you need to leave some of that, say some of that for later, and compartmentalize. And I think that's part of all of this journey or process or being great, is doing the work inside. It's an inside job before it's anything else.
Yeah, that's a really big deal for people to understand. It's just basic etiquette. If I feel like you run your mouth about other people, I don't feel safe confiding anything in you. It doesn't feel like a professional environment. But also knowing it's a popular word now, but like knowing your triggers, knowing your little traumas, things that have affected you, so you get tangled up, and that would also affect the negotiation, or feeling like somebody's devaluing you, or maybe it's not about you. Maybe it's about their budget. Maybe it's not about this. They just couldn't do Saturday. They did want you. We tell ourselves stories. You get yourself all tangled up. So being able to kind of be cleansed, release any of that extra baggage, and be wholly focused on the task at hand.
And also, Jesse, my mom always said, you can't take everyone's money. And when I say that, that means that every client, you have to also realize who is an emotional trigger for you. Who is it? Who triggers your trauma, or what companies, or what areas trigger your trauma, and try to dance away from those. Try to stay in the light, as they say, Carol, stay in the light, poltergeist. But when I say that, that means that there's clients out here now today who are working, who are very prominent. I just won't. It doesn't matter how you can't pour money on me.
Yep.
Like,
I know it.
because guess what? At the end of the day, I just know that it's just going to trigger some trauma for me, and it's going to end bad anyway. So why I'm going to do it? I just rather have the day off.
I feel you.
That's it. And that goes it goes in any direction, companies or anything like that. We have to start doing the work,
Something that came to mind earlier was the role colorism must play. The role colorism must play in the beauty industry. We're aware of it as outsiders. I'm certainly aware of it. You're on the inside, and I would imagine that you've seen a great deal of micro or macro, aggressions on the topic. And people often I feel a couple times a year, folks get, they're trying to make somebody lighter, or like there's a lot of factors I would imagine as a Black creative, as a Black artist, little commentary on your work and complexion that folks coming up should maybe be aware of, and can maybe learn from how you've navigated with tact, how you've navigated those waters.
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is, so I've been in the business for about 20 years now, but working at that thing for like 10, Okay. And even now, I have to shrink myself to go into some of these places. When I say shrink, it's not like I have this huge ego. I come in here, I'm chill with everybody. But when I say shrink, is that I know that the people in fashion, if I go to do a cover of this or that, I don't want to name any publications, but I know that the first thing they're going to do, I'm a black makeup artist. The first thing they're going to do to me is they're going to say, oh, they're going to think that I'm going to overdo it. That is completely overdone, and sometimes the character of themselves when it's too much lash in the morning. Too much powder, too much contouring. They feel that I am, as a black makeup artist, going to bring that.
Me too, because we're all a monolith. Yeah.
I'm going to bring that to set, and every time it doesn't matter. And the thing is, and I'm like, guys, so I know what it looks like. So it's the little proverbial, the editors want to come walk with me, talk with me. They want to slightly educate me if they're not already educated on who I am. But I'm like, guys, all these references that you pulled, this is my work. You don't even do your homework, And so the funny thing is,
anticipating before you've even done anything, I probably need to talk to the brother about bringing it down a bit. Here are some examples of what we're really going for, so you don't come in too hot. And actually, those examples are actually your work. Stuff. Yeah, that's amazing.
And so that's a microaggression. But so I was on a Zoom recently. I do a lot of these talks with like college students and things like that. And they were like, "How do you handle perceived slight or prejudice in the work environment, or honestly, sometimes blatant racism when you're working in Europe or in fashion?" And it's not hidden. You hear it. You hear it. It's like, oh, her hair, or you'll hear it. You'll hear the trauma. You'll see how they work with, they'll spend all their time all around the white models and get them together. And then sometimes the black model is an afterthought, or we have to tame her hair down. And instead of actually, and that's trauma that they're triggering, not just on myself as the people who are, the beauty professionals behind the scenes, but now she has to go and perform. And she has to still be on the same vibrational eye line as these women who you've been doting over for the last few hours.
So in the world at large, we very clearly see that colorism is a very real thing. We see it in every aspect of life, whether you acknowledge it or not. It's been a huge issue, for me. I benefit from it greatly. Many people do. And it seems to be increasingly addressed. And as an outsider looking into the fashion industry, the cosmetic industry, beauty industry, we see it manifest itself in terms of who gets shine, people actually getting their skin lightened, and you hear things on social media, controversies, etc. I would imagine that's very prevalent. You have an inside look at that, particularly in a heavily white-dominated field, one of the last kind of bastions of old world colonialism. Yeah. What does that bring to mind for you? Because also folks climbing the ladder are going to have to deal with that and going to have to choose how to deal with that.
Well, when you think about it from a historical context, the European ideal of beauty has literally sent shockwaves through all of our psyches. From when we look at, pro-whitening essence in Asian skincare, when we look at mercury in bleaching creams, even when we look at the faces of Brazil, it's seemingly very fair, blue eyes, but when you go to Brazil or Bahia or
60% black.
Yeah, it's more of them for Africa than it is black Americans. So knowing that, and since we've had, and I'm a little bit of a history buff, since we've had a television screen, since we've literally had cinema, it's created the star. And that was a blonde, blue-eyed woman. The Greta Garbo's, the Marlene Dietrichs. And so, looking or trying to take ourselves away or own our own narrative and heritage, or even what is beautiful, it's something that we're still tasked with today. But I don't think that the growth that we've seen is because of, the industry. It's because of how democratic social media is. The fact that woman was like, okay, now I want to see myself in these campaigns. That's why I feel like visual representation. I know visual representation is so important. When young girls can see themselves in Alek Wek, who's from the South Sudan, or, Lupita, or, Mary J. Blige, who is quintessentially from, Yonkers, whatever. It does something. It says that, hey, I can do this. I can occupy this space. So that's why I feel like representation is so important. But also, when we go and lean in a little bit more, we realize that I've been on sets and I've seen the trauma happen with the women that I've been with. These women in 2020, women are still bringing their foundation to the job, because some of the makeup artists who are the top people who are working today are really they know how to do white women better than they know how to do black women. But for me to get here, for me to sit on the seat with you right now, I had to know how to do everybody and run circles around my white counterparts and just fly faster, be more diplomatic, be quicker, be able to talk about references. And I look at my counterparts, and I don't, not comparing, because I love, my journey, but I just had to be so much more dynamic, and I didn't have any option. So when
that doesn't sum up the black experience.
It is the experience, but But even if I don't do it again, if I put my brushes down and never walk back to it, I am happy that I'm more dynamic, you know, just because it actually has been giving me more colors in my crayon box. But yeah, colorism exists, man. I feel it's not just colorism, it's racism, you know, and I just wanted to make sure that when people are coming into this business, they have an understanding of that this business is one of the last businesses that can say to someone to their face, oh, you're not going to work for the season because, you know, we don't need any black models right now. Or, you know, they can just take you out based off of something that you can't do that anywhere else.
Yeah, you gotta use code words in other businesses, urban or,
absolutely. But it even trickles behind the scenes. Like, you know, I'm behind the scenes and I'm realizing that, okay, as an assistant, if I worked out more, the better I appear to look, you know, I'm gonna keep it real. These gay European white guys would feel more comfortable with me on set. So, and that's kind of the trauma that, like, I even felt like I had to have a white partner, you know, to make it in fashion, you know, because that was the brainwashing that was happening. I mean, at 25, 26, you know, your image, even though you're grown, you're still shaping your sense of identity. I remember having, you know, I went from being Pat McGrath's assistant to being on the same agency as her, in New York. And then I remember having my book. You know, and I love my agents, but I remember it's a thing. So having my book, and this is when they still send books out. Before
that's your calling card, showing your work.
And I had some of the great, I had, you know, Naomi here, Jordan Dunn, Joan Smalls, you know, a few Beyonce when I first worked with her. But they had to take these great women, some of the biggest women of our time, you know. I've seen Serena Williams out of my book to put in unknown Eastern European models or unknown white models, just so my book would translate across the pond. So it would look like I'm not a black makeup artist, because that's not what they're technically trying to sell at the time.
Yeah.
And I had a knowledge of it, but it really kind of messed my head up a bit.
Sure.
In so many different ways.
Being kind, it is erasure. It is literally erasing blackness. And if that aesthetic, which is, you know, I'll say it, white supremacy as an aesthetic is being communicated, and it is inherently, it is not neutral, it is actively anti-black.
It's actively anti-black.
It is the, you know, when I always peeped from a young age when people use descriptors like, you know, oh, she's beautiful, blonde, blue-eyed, as if those have anything to do with being beautiful, which is to say that if you're not those things, you're not beautiful.
Yeah.
It's white supremacy baked into cartoons and commercials and just casual conversation. So you feel like you have to chip away pieces of yourself to just withstand it, where everybody else is just kind of living and living their dreams and their pursuit is deep.
I have a really strong black family and mom, you know, and so I come from some serious roots that I was just like, okay, if I'm making myself, but I'm changing myself, what am I making? You know, like, so for me, it wasn't about that, and I just realized I'm not going to push myself in this fashion industry because they're booking the same people. I'm just not what they want. It's a sense of nationalism in fashion. They want all the French people laugh at the same jokes. They have the history, like, you know, the London people who are from London, they hang together. And I'm a black guy from Harlem, like feeling like a bull in a china shop, you know, on these sets. So I was, you know, I talked to my agents and I'm like, I want to go where I'm celebrated, not tolerated. I was tolerated, I felt. And so I went into a more commercial, you know, route. But the reason I still campaign and I'm here for it is because the fact that now I'm you know, starting a diversity council with L'Oreal, or, you know, making sure that any area that they want my artistry, my voice has to come along with it. I think that 2020 is the ultimate equalizer. And I was scared to speak up about things that were happening before because I felt like I was going to lose something. You're going to lose your L'Oreal contract.
What we're talking about a lot of is realistically navigating the world. So you can come in with a plan. As Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. You can be ready. You can be technically nice at your craft, but you also have to navigate the social politics of a set, of a space, of even getting on set, which is to have your book and cutting out pieces of your damn heart by taking your own people out of your book to appear like something you're not because of the overt racism. So you get on set, and I think one of the real unique value adds that we do culturally here and that you offer today is a real inside look at like the realities of expectations once you get on set. And look, you're ready, be prepared for people to have, you know, racist preconceptions about your work, about what they anticipate you're going to do, about even when you're making a touch or doing something that any other artist would do. They're going to assume yours is not rooted in something. I imagine, you know, you had an art history background, you know what the hell you're doing, you understand your craft, you studied under somebody who was really structured and successful. So maybe just kind of walk us through a little bit of kind of maybe do's and don'ts, the reality of life on set in the trailer, which is its own culture.
So there's different types of sets, but one thing that people have to understand, whoever's watching, is that knowing your personal brand, knowing that, so the moment that I get on set, the moment that the car pulls up, whatever that looks like, whether I'm assistant, a key grip, or, whatever, my brand is, what everyone is saying about me when I'm not here, before I get here and when I leave.
What impression you're making.
What impression I'm making. Now, constantly having to make impression, but when you insert blackness or when you insert culture, or other, you have to have a heightened awareness. And so you should be able to sort of hover above yourself to objectively look at yourself from the outside. And when I say that, actors have introjection, I think it's called, or something, where you can, you can just have an idea of, are you self-aware? So being self-aware is also knowing nonverbal cues, knowing when the energy changes in a room, knowing when I should possibly leave because there's a really important conversation that I don't need to be privy to. I don't want someone to tell me to leave, because listen, at the end of the day, every time I do a job or I'm with a client, I'm invited back. I'm not guaranteed to see my client, even though we've been working together for 10 years, or this person. If I have a contract, best believe you're gonna see me again. That's why I love contracts. But, we're invited back because of the energy that we bring, because we lift that space in some way. But one thing that you're gonna have to realize is that the sad part is that a lot of people or cultures, they look at us as like, I'll tolerate this because it's trendy, or I'll tolerate this talent or these people because they came with the celebrity who I think is so cool at the moment.
Sure.
And not knowing this might be the next generation or breed of real serious talent. But when you have that in front of you, what do you do with it? So a lot of people are like, Sir John, well, when you encounter racism, what do you do? And I do, and I see it all the time. I remember being in boardrooms and hearing the things that I'm hearing about, cosmetics. So cosmetics goes deeper than just makeup. It's about culture. It's about making sure that women all around the world can see themselves on a foundation, having the right shade, that it actually looks like them. You'll see the reason that Fenty was so popular and so massive is because she revolutionized the way we're looking at ourselves. The 40 Shades wasn't necessarily revolutionary, but the fact that she says, hey, I want these women to understand they were on my radar in the lab. That was not done. So, that's why we're here. I'm here developing products and things that are going to make sure that we address the needs and the concerns of women who are not even born yet. Because all cosmetics all beauty is emotional. When you have a concealer, the reason it's more emotional than fashion is because you don't look your handbag in the face. It doesn't cover a childhood scar. But what cosmetics does is it brings us back to what our parents did, our moms used to do, like how our moms got ready for church every morning, So, and that pride we've always had culturally. We've always taken esteem,
it's nurturing,
even when we didn't see visual representation. How do you handle it? You got to be diplomatic. So even when you want to pop off, or even and so many times I wanted to go there because I felt licensed too, and just you came for me, and I didn't sim for you. But I have to be so diplomatic, and I have to rise above it, and I have to be just the consummate gentleman, even though I didn't want to be. I remember, when Eric Garner, to bring a little context back in New York, when he got choked and that whole thing, this is before George Floyd, all that. I was so frustrated. I just remember going to New York Sports Club and just running on a treadmill, talking to my friend Kalana, who was a black woman who's the health and beauty director at InStyle at the time. And I was like, what can I do? I want to do something. I want to say something. But if I say something, am I going to lose everything? Am I going to lose my L'Oreal contract I just got? Am I going to lose this job? Am I going to be able to get booked on the same things just because I'm speaking up for injustice, or anyway? And at the time, we both agreed, it was a different time. If you look at the Dixie Chicks back in the day, if they were now, we would have rallied around them.
Exactly.
But they were
banished.
They got banished because they wanted to bring some a voice or activism into their art. And times change, and so, but when I look at, how society has changed, I think this is the best time to be alive. This is the best time to be a creative and actually want to speak on and hold people accountable. Yeah, it has to stop. And also one thing I want everyone to realize is that when you're in a place and you start to see racisms or microaggression, I've been working around women for all my life. I'm I'm a girl mascot in a way. But when I talk about, if I tell any board or any meeting I'm talking to any company and I say, talk about women's rights. When women feel, if a woman came in and she felt, when she wasn't safe walking from her car, she felt like someone followed her for a block, we would be up in arms. We would, make sure we walked her to her car. We would institute change in the office, or whatever that looks like. If a woman says, hey, I want to go to this agency, but I need more women to be agents, or advocates, on my side, we would make it happen. But whenever you insert, culture or, or microaggressions or anything that has to do with ethnic differences, it's a match to your imagination. It's something we'll work up toward, something we'll build into the next year. And that's a problem, because when we think about it, what is fact, is that when Black and brown people stand up for themselves, they stand up for everybody. When you look at gay rights, when you look at animal rights, women's rights, it comes from civil rights. It comes from Black people.
Making sacrifices and suffering the worst consequences. Staying on like the actual onset practical things that you do and navigate. I was reminded of something like, as an actor, on set, I learned early on, in terms of treating folks the way you want to be treated. If people a director comes over, we're doing a scene, an intimate, heavy scene. Director comes over, gives you a note. As soon as the director comes over to give my co-star a note, I walk away. That's a private conversation between them two.
Okay.
I choose to do that because I don't want to color you be embarrassed because you're getting critiqued on how you're performing in front of the director. Like, I'm not involved. If the director is talking to you, I just provide that space. I thought of that when you talked about kind of, if you're on the chair, you have your client in the chair and they're on a private phone call or something. Maybe you learned early on that, like, you don't want to get that look, like, could you give me a second? You just excuse yourself. Little things like that, that probably you've learned over time. And sometimes in a trailer, and as an outsider, somebody, I sit in the chair and I leave, but on sets, Makeup and Hair lives there. That is a space that is shared, and there are tier systems. There's people who have power and people who don't, people who are day players just visiting, people who are tenured essentially. And I, by the way, have been many places where I've seen them move through, and that girl got let go. They didn't really like her. They didn't really fuck with her. Maybe it wasn't about whether she was good or not. It just didn't really like her attitude. I would imagine there's some navigating there to do when you were coming up versus now you have a different respect about you. Does that draw anything up for you?
Well, the thing is, it goes back to also attitude and energy, and knowing what cannot be taken away from you. So one thing is, no matter what set I go onto, I control my vibe. I control what happens to me. Listen, you might go in the corner and cry. Somebody might yell at you or try to talk to you, down to you. I've seen so much. It's people, especially the old school fashion, where they would just embarrass or yell. They thought it was fabulous to be nasty, to keep it real. But also you have to have a playful sensibility about you. They know who to try. People know who to try. They're not going to do that to everyone, but even if you are having a bad day, just realize that your confidence doesn't start and stop within these walls. Like, I am who I am, whether it be an amazing mother to three or whatever that looks like, or a young person who's an assistant. And that it's not depleted, or it doesn't dissipate in the face of someone who is not secure within themselves, someone who is possibly getting a divorce for their wives. You can see the toxicity,
where it's not about you.
Where it's not about you.
We talked about coming in beforehand and letting your stuff go, your triggers, being aware of who you are. If you're in therapy, like kind of being aware of who you are. In the same way, give yourself that pep talk. Remind yourself, you come in a whole person, you're leaving a whole person.
You're leaving a whole person. And also, you're gonna get chopped down so many times. I say this to everyone. I got fired a few times. Like I got let go of this and that, but not because of things that I've done intentionally, but we all make mistakes. We all don't always, read what we need to read the right way or things, but I also am thankful for all of the losses, man. Like, a loss will teach you how to win if you're humble enough to learn from a loss. So for me, I look at my losses as the wins, because they've always been the space that I gave myself some space to think. The high times manage themselves. Like, good times are gonna be easy. You're not remembering too much about a good year, except, I was fun or had some good vacations.
But in terms of lessons,
I remember, getting fired. I remember what I have to do when I had to get to the next level and also I've had my wings clipped so many times, and not because of something I've always done, but because the business has changed. I look at how social media right now is, there's so many people, the blessing, and going back to your point, the trailer, the blessing is now women and young men can have an audience of people who like the walk that they walk, who are outside of this room or this set or the studio, and they can follow that parallel journey with them. So my whole thing is this: I tell classes of people, guys, build a social media presence for yourself. Build some kind of alliance of people who actually walk the walk that you walk. And it doesn't matter what you do. You can be
so that trailer is not your whole world.
The trailer should never be your world.
That interaction, that's your career.
It was all we had.
That's the only, that word's going to travel. Have another space where you can actually have some impact on that word that's
Absolutely.
traveling.
And I think the biggest thing, if I can say one massive thing to everyone, is that personality is more important than your craft. It is. And
that's big.
And I don't know, maybe if you're like a singer, okay, yeah, or a pianist or something like that, you know? But when I look at the people who just weren't pleasant to be around, or like, for example, I've seen so many people who, and I hate to say this, and I'm gonna keep it real, but who are just not memorable because they're just technically, they don't have anything that's like delightful to be around. And delightful to be around doesn't have to be something that you create or you act, but just, are you happy with your day? Are you happy with the 5 minutes that you're having right now?
Yeah.
And that cascades outward as energy.
Let's get specific on this, because this is specifically, as it relates to Black folks, like, we're not afforded the luxuries that others are. And in businesses like acting, other performance, bad behavior is rewarded. Acting wild, cursing people out, being neglectful, being disrespectful, they must be, it's kind of treated like you must be dope, like you must be a genius. We'll tolerate it. That's part of being a megastar. Whereas Blackness, try being like a dark-skinned person, try being like a non-traditional size 0 woman. You walk in the room, that's already strike 1 and 2. You're already aggressive. You're already aggressive. We haven't even said shit.
Damn.
So like, you know, you can keep it real and that can go wrong real fast. So having a sense of like modulation and understanding, it ain't fair. I don't set the rules. It's not my fault. It shouldn't destroy my self-respect, you know, but this is the reality of the situation. Let me conserve my energy, conserve my who I'm going to straighten out.
And this goes back to the tools, right? In the toolbox. And when I say this, anyone who's watching now, 2020 is the ultimate year that we all realize we had to go back to work. 2020 is the year that we've had to all realize I need to have more tools than I have in my arsenal. And when I say tools, psychological tools, we had to have coping mechanisms. Listen, the Black and brown community, there's so much trauma that we've induced just this year alone. There's a pandemic, but then insert Blackness. You know, so as we look at Breonna Taylor, and this is from my place or whatever, but Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, all that was happening, but we still had to jump on Zooms that day, the next day. We still had to be in boardrooms. We still had to be in meetings and still act like, and the world came along with us and realized, okay, this is too much. But
while also asking you to help them. Remember this. Remember what happened. Remember what it was like. Remember the emails and texts that you were getting. And well-intentioned. You know, likely for a lot of people. But you also have to take care of. And then, you know, I'd love to know more. I'd love to, and like, show me how, show me what to read. And well-intentioned folks, but it's still, I got to take care of myself, my own spirit, my family. I just be quiet. Can I just sit on the goddamn couch for a second and have to work and have to function and now have to start passing out reading lists and giving, you know, psychological massages to all the white folks in my life who have been coddled by everything. I mean, that's the reality of it. And
it's not our job. And the thing is, it's like, and I've seen so many women, especially Black women, I've seen them have to take on more work to educate and do this. But like, no, sit still. We've been speaking. Go to Toni Morrison, go to James Baldwin. We've been talking, we've been educating you guys. Because when you're ready to listen does not mean that we are now at the place where we need to teach.
Exactly.
So my whole thing is, I know that in this space, when you're a creative, any space that you want to go into, just know that, hey, there is going to be a point where there's going to be, you're going to have a boiling over point. I think that this summer for me was the largest indicator of like, wow, I'm so stressed out. Like, I don't understand this. I'm just so like provoked to just like, it was maddening to me. And then I had to be on Zooms and then no one's checking in. No one's like, oh, how is it going? I know everyone's watching the news. Everyone's seeing what's happening. So for me, I was like, wow, this is so interesting that no one's checking in, no one's leaning in to see, hey, you know what, how is your culture today? And not literally, but there's a proverbial nod.
This makes me think also of, you're on Zooms, you have to give back, you have to interact. I'm from Chicago, not far away is Buffalo. We used to roll through there as kids on road trips. You found your way back, you found your way to spending your time, giving your time and counsel to Chicago public school students, is that right?
It started out with, I was at Ohio State University, Southern California. Like, I've done some colleges, whatever, but they contacted me to like the Chicago public schools, and I don't even know how they found out about me at all. But I was like, okay, guys, a teacher called me crying, not crying, but FaceTime me, and she started tearing up, and I felt her. I just felt her. And she was like, I just want the kids to, this is when it counts. This is when their attendance counts. They're in 8th grade. and basically they don't see why they need to be here, why they need to show up, but you got to show up for next year, show up for yourself. Would you want to come on and just talk to them? I'm like, well, do you want me to talk to them about like celebrities? Because this summer, when all of the height of everything was happening, I didn't talk about any makeup. I didn't want to talk. I don't want to post about any makeup, any brands I was aligned with. That's when I started the diversity council with L'Oreal and any brand I'm working with. Guys, we have to do the work. Let's start now. She was like, no, I just want you to talk to them about what you've been talking about. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like, all right. So I've been doing these Zooms with these schools, man, all around Chicago. And it just fills me. It just makes me, it just fills me, And so for me, because I am them. I was those kids, who did not see outside of Buffalo. Because my life technically was supposed to be a totally different thing. Yeah. It was supposed to be. So when I see their faces and when I see them asking the questions, and they're brilliant. And the thing is, the only difference between these young children and the children that we see on Park Avenue is that their grandparents had a head start, a running head start.
Had access, generational connection to people who can share those wisdoms and connections and network. And as an educator, as a former teacher, I can tell you that just their exposure to you, exposure to knowing that such a job exists and seeing it humanized, like not just a sheet, not just reduced to one silo of what you do, but like it's you. You're a person, you got style, you have a voice, you have an experience. You're creating tangible goals for these young folks. We try to, we as young people aspire to do things that are reasonable, that we've seen people that look like us can do.
Representation.
It's perfectly reasonable to think, we're coming up, I'm coming from Chicago in the 80s, crack era. If you just think you can just play ball or, as Biggie said, you had a wicked jump shot or you sling crack, like that's not crazy. That makes perfect sense because those are two things that I know people do.
Absolutely.
I don't, when I taught high school, I understand to my students, like, you don't know anybody that knows anybody that's benefited from a high school diploma. Why the hell am I sitting here? For what? I don't know anybody that's benefited from it. People pursue tangible goals. So for them to be able to see you spend your time sharing with them your wisdom, your experience, that you're actually like, I love the irony of like you got pushed out of college and are now traveling, doing college, speaking at colleges.
Virtually, because of COVID,
safely, with safe distance. But that is what it's about, your actual walk, not titles, and not falling into somebody else's groove. So I commend you for that. It's a big deal. It means more than you know. I think you're giving people real examples of carving a new path for them to follow. And I think that's a really beautiful way for us to kind of, get close to wrapping this up because it really shows kind of full circle this journey that you're on, and it means nothing if you are not connecting, letting it curl all the way around.
Man, and to one of our last points is that, but the thing is, they feed me more than I feed them. So they inspire me. They are the ones who actually, they hype me up to make it feel like, oh, you know what? Yeah, we got to do this. And so that's the continual sense of what is it called? Community, and that's what we need. Community, and so community, like where it should never start and stop. It should be a continuous band. So listen, I'm blessed to stay a student. Like we talked about yesterday, guys, continue to stay. Be a white belt. There's too much arrogance at the black belt level. When you're a black belt, you feel like I can't learn anything any longer. What else can you teach me that I don't already know? But as long as you continue to be a dry sponge and a white belt, man, you'll always have that curiosity that leads you to great things.
Critical word. Can't overstate that enough. Curiosity. Stay humble, stay available, and keep learning. Pleasure talking with you, brother. This is a really beautiful class we put together.
Thank you very much.